Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, okay. So, I wasn't quite ready. So, let's say we are coming back into reconvening. The board is ready to reconvene into open session. Just what the Board of Education met in executive session pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, NMSA 1978. Section 10-15-1 H2 for the purpose of a limited personnel matter regarding the superintendent's contract. The matters discussed in the executive session were limited only to those specified. So now we're going to go back to our regular scheduled meeting, and our first item for consideration is approval of the consent agenda item for consideration for review and approval of the 2023-2024 work calendars and pay schedules. This is a discussion action. I don't know if we had, if Renette Apodaca, Chief Financial Officer, Mark Turnbull, I think is here. Unless the board members have any other additional questions to this.
Board President, I think it's a consent.
It's a consent. Yeah.
It shouldn't be action. Discussion should just be action.
Yeah, unless there was any, I'm just opening up to see if
okay.
there was any questions. But if there isn't, then I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda items.
I second, Josefina.
May I have a roll call, please?
Peggy Mueller-Aragon. Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Whitney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes, our next item is special issue is consideration for approval of the preliminary official statement relating to the district's general obligation bonds series 2023. This is a discussion action. And we also have Mr. Mark Turnbull here from accounting. So you have the floor. Unless there's some additional questions. I know there was some information that was sent to us. I don't know if you want to present some information or if the board just wants to go straight into questions. There was a lot of information that was forwarded to us on this. Mr. Turnbull, I don't know if you had any other information you wanted to share at this time, or I know you answered lots of questions probably and concerns. So,
Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, I do have a bond counsel available. Eric Harrigan is here with RBC and also Art Mellendris with Madrill. And also on Zoom, we should also have a Matthew Howard Matthew Hogan with Sherman and Howard, our disclosure counsel. He was he prepared the preliminary official statement, so he's also available for questions.
okay. Are there any questions from the board on this? Go ahead.
I just have, so, this is just, I know a lot of my questions were answered and things were, updated as we were told they would be. But I'm still looking at some of the, numbers of students were on the digital page 54. It said that we have 9,247 charter school students. But then on another page, on the revised document, on another page, it says that we have over 8,900. So does that really not matter as long as we're close? If the two numbers are different, does it make any difference?
Member Peggy Mueller-Aragon. The language was similar to prior years, as we're saying over or about. We did not give exact numbers in prior years, so we went up.
Yeah, because one of them just says we have 9,247 charter school students. And then on another page, it says that we have over 8,900 attending charter schools. So as long as that's okay with everybody who's doing it, I have no idea because I don't do this stuff. So I just catch that kind of stuff. So as long as it's okay with,
And
that okay, or
yeah, and I will say when Board Member Jackson and I will sit when we have to sign all of those myriads of papers, and Art does a really good job of bringing the information to us where it's pretty consistent and correct. But if there's any other changes that they have to make up to that day, we do it at that point and we're signing it. But it's pretty much an approximation is what I'm looking at everything that they do in the document that they put forward. And there's been, this is going to be it'll be our second year that we get to do this. So I know the first year when Mr. Melendez sat with us, he gave us great, because Secretary Jackson had so many questions. And so, but it was a great, it was a great overview in terms of the how and the why. So I'm feeling really confident with the way that the documents are set up. And I think that's how I looked at it,
Okay.
Mueller Aragon, when it comes to us, is that there's a lot of approximations that are given in that because it's a huge legal document.
Okay, and then the last thing on the digital page of the proposed document, not the final document, on the outstanding debt for the 2023, let me check, 2023 B bonds, it said 47 million. But then on the updated one, it said 43,250,000. But none of the others were changed. So if you look at the 2009, it stayed the same, the 2010, all the way down, except for the 2023 B ones, it went from 47 million to the official one. It said 43,250,000. So I just was wondering why that changed and the others didn't.
So good evening, Madam President and members of the board. Eric Harrigan with RBC Capital Markets. So 47 million is what the board authorized in the refunding. As markets fluctuate, the par amount of the refunding bonds will change. And so the number that you will actually see in the final pricing results will be different from this number.
Okay.
And so on the front and in the maturity schedule, we try to get an approximation of what it will look like come the actual pricing. But in the other component of it will change. And once the final official statement comes out, the 2023 B bonds will be corrected for the exact par amount that was sold for the refunding throughout the entire document.
Okay. And that's just that was just my assumption. I just wanted to make sure. And I know that you did answer this question when you were saying that if we see that the interest rate is not going to go lower, then we won't do the refunding, correct?
That is correct. We plan on pricing on Wednesday of next week. Between now and then, if interest rates were to shoot up and significantly, the refunding does not generate 3% present value savings. Similar to last year, if you recall, we were looking at refunding the same bonds with taxable bonds at that time because it was an advanced refunding. Rates did shoot up. We did not execute the refunding because it was not economically beneficial for the district.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Right. Any other discussion, questions? No? All right. May I have go ahead, Barbara.
I'll make the motion to approve. I just have one real general question in terms of the timeline. Once we've taken this step, what's the timeline for adding specificity that actually goes to the voters? And this is really more of a board process, I think, than necessarily the general statement of the bond.
I don't know the answer to that one.
So, Madam President and board member, I can kind of attempt. So what is being issued is 70 million of the 200 million that was authorized by voters in November of 2021. So voters have already taken action to authorize those bonds. We're just now in the process of issuing what voters have already approved the district to issue.
So it goes specifically to what was approved in the election.
That is correct.
Okay. You want to state your motion fully?
I move that we, as I pull out my, I move that we approve the preliminary official statement relating to the district's general obligation bonds Series 2023.
I'll second.
Have a roll call, please.
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez,
Yes.
Robert Peterson,
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes. Our next item for discussion, thank you, gentlemen. Our next item for discussion is the government affairs update. And here comes our team. We have Dr. Escobedo and Jessica Martinez. Hey.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Elder. We are bringing you an update from our government affairs team, which will serve as our final report for the 2023 legislative session. The governor had until Friday, April 7th to sign legislation. So tonight we're going to go over some of the highlights from that action and will be available for your questions. Regarding HB2, the governor did line item veto some of the budget items with no major changes otherwise. One of those being an included mandatory 6% raise for all employees. The language that was vetoed in that item is the average 6% raise, meaning that there's a 6% raise for all employees across the board. The governor did sign House Bill 4, the Voting Rights Bill, which has a clause that prohibits school or professional development to be held on Election Day. This will not go into effect until 2024, and our team's already had some conversations with the sponsors of that legislation and the PED to have this highlighted as priority for us for next session. The governor also did veto the school dual credit task force, saying that there was already a group that existed that could serve the same function and purposes that as that task force did or was going to. She also, vetoed House Bill 126, the school graduation requirements. We know that this conversation is going to be ongoing and will continue, so we welcome any input from on the district's position for this policy moving forward.
So, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, the governor did sign House Bill 127, which sets up that minimum $25,000 minimum for our licensed educational assistants. Additionally, she did sign House Bill 130, which is the increase of instructional hours to that 1,140. She did pocket veto a bill that we were monitoring, the charter school expenditure plan, and that would have required us to disclose in detail how we utilize the 2% administrative fee from charter schools. She did sign the capital outlay projects, which had $13.4 million in appropriations. And we did include a packet for you of those appropriations. And the governor also signed the Universal Lunch Program bill. And again, we're meeting, I believe, next week with the Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Blakey, and the governor's office about implementation. One of your priority bills, the capital outlay offset bill, it's going to save us about $12.2 million. It reduced our offset by a third, which is our total offset's about $37 million. Finally, a couple of quick bills, SB 383, which made some minor changes to the background check policy. So we'll work with school police on improving our processes. So you may be seeing some improvements to the policy in relation to the statute. And finally, the governor did sign SB 417, which provides a track for vocational teachers to get certified as full-time licensed teachers.
Nice.
And then I just wanted to call out the language in the budget in your packet around expenditures and how the state's really identifying how to evaluate expenditures in the budget. So as we come forward to you in the budget season with those charter school budgets, kind of relating that language to what our analysis also includes.
So, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, I do want to thank our government affairs team for the work this year. They've put in a lot of hard work. So we will begin work on implementation and begin attending interim meetings, and we stand open for questions at this time.
Are there any questions from the board? Go ahead, Board Member Jackson.
So I sent this sent this earlier and I think, is this where it's going to be addressed? The HB7. So I noticed that HB7 was not listed in here. And so I was wondering if we were going to get an analysis of HB7 and how it affects current policies that we have, how it overlaps with the children's code. I am getting a lot of questions from the community about what HB7 means for the schools. And so I am wondering if if you have that analysis ready to go, or if that's when we will kind of have some talking points available for the community, because I think there's fear whether it's rightful or not, but I think that we need to know, how does it affect any policies that we have within APS?
So, Madam President, Board Member Jackson, regarding HB7, we did not track this particular legislation because there is no action for APS included there. I'm going to respond from the question that we gave to the board, but first I'm going to put my glasses on. All right. So the question is relating to your question. So the Act outlines discrimination, not what can or cannot be taught or discussed in a school related to, health education, sex education. PED rule, content standards for health education and benchmarks, American School Counselor Association standards, and the New Mexico Department of Health School Health Manual are followed for pregnancy or reproductive health care prevention in schools. Although school-based health centers, and I think that's maybe where some of those questions are coming from, are subject to provisions in the Act, school-based health centers are not considered an entity of APS. They function under the rules and guidelines of HIPAA and their governing organizations. So let's see.
Does that include like nurses? Like nurses fall under APS, but school-based health centers fall outside. They fall under
separate, yes, under their separate medical entity. School nurses and school counselors function under the under the FERPA governance. In other words, that is not, it's not going to impact APS. It's a non-discrimination legislation that's just simply stating that any of the non-discrimination laws that currently apply should continue to apply.
Whatever you just read, will you be forwarding to us?
I believe they have it. It's in the board
in your
member questions.
Q&As.
Oh, it was in there. Okay. Okay. So I appreciate that. The other question that I had was, I had two more. So with HB4, going back to what you said at the very beginning, let me scroll back up here. Okay, so HB4, the voting rights bill, it was talking about every general election and regular local election shall be a school holiday. But you said we are going to be highlighting that. Are we for that or against that?
So the language that will go into effect for 2024 prohibits us for having a school day for students or staff.
Mhm.
So this year we used election day as a professional development day, and it worked really well.
Great idea.
So we want to strike the word staff.
Okay.
So
I agree.
So we're trying to get that changed so that we can move forward with the calendar that you had this year and forward years.
Okay, perfect. And then if we can go to the EA salary, I think it's HB 127. I did receive a question. I think I forwarded it to the finance people, but you guys might actually know this answer. Sorry, let me go to my email real quick, if you don't mind. So the question was, do we have any idea if the new pay scale, will it also be tiered, or will everyone go to the flat $25,000 regardless of education and training?
So Madam President, Member Jackson, I believe that needs to be negotiated, but currently the G1 salary schedule, which is for educational assistants, has different levels based off of college credit hours.
College credit. Okay, so the answer is it will need to be negotiated, but current G1 schedule has tiers for college credit.
So for example, if you're level 1, if you have up to 7 hours of college credit, you're at the minimum, which is 17,840. We can send you this link.
Okay.
And then 90+ hours gets you an additional
Mhm.
$2,000.
Okay.
And Madam President, Board Member Jackson, just to highlight and emphasize that that raise does apply only to licensed educational assistants.
Okay. That's it.
Okay. Superintendent, did you want, you look like you wanted to add something there, or are you okay? I'm trying to read your face.
No, thank you. I'm okay. I was gonna say something, but I think Dr. Escobedo got it all, so I'm good.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure. Any other board member Mueller-Aragon?
So then I know that you did say that you're going to be meeting a little bit more about the universal school meals. So you'll have a little bit more information about it. So when I was looking, does APS not maximize access to the federal funds for the costs of the breakfast and lunch? So do we or do we not?
Madam President, Board Member Mueller-Aragon, yes, we do.
We do. Okay. So then do we have any idea what the cost is going to end up being if we already maximize access to those funds now when it's going to be universal? What is that cost going to be?
So Madam President, Board Member Mueller-Aragon, at this school business official conference last week, the way I understood them rolling out the payment side of it, the business side of it,
Mhm.
is any difference between what the district would receive and the actual cost would be paid for by the legislation. So one of the things that we would like to meet with them on is the implementation of, site-based kitchens and having them understand our central kitchen and how we have efficient and effective operations.
So the money is there to pay whatever, right? That difference then? Kind of, maybe.
I believe that the high end. they
hearing.
funded
Yeah,
at
sure it
22
is.
million. So that was a very liberal estimate because that included some facility upgrades as well.
I hope it is, but we get unfunded mandates like all the time. And so we'll figure that one out in a while. And then the other question I have, and I lost it, it was about the studying, and I don't know if you have any information on this, about studying the high school start times, the House Memorial. So I don't know if you know anything about it. So they're going to study the high school start times, even though we just implemented different high school start times. So if this study comes out, can they mandate that we change them again?
So, Madam President and Board Member Mueller-Aragon, the study actually came from one of our students who was
Right. I remember
at,
that, yeah.
at Albuquerque High, and what she was modeling was the California model of implementing later start times. So, in California, they studied it for a year, and then there was a 3-year implementation to get districts on board for this. And there's still waiver options, and it's a pretty complicated system still. So I know you're hearing a lot, but for my 17-year-old, he's excited for his senior year.
Oh, yeah, we're hearing a whole bunch about that, and a lot of it is not very happy. So then I just have like some specific questions, and I don't know if this would be better if I just sent them to you. And it's also about the House Bill 7, and then just some like really specific questions that I got that maybe you could, if you think that these are better answered in a different setting, I will just give you the 3 questions that I received that parents wanted an answer to.
Madam President, Board Member Mueller-Aragon, yes, definitely, please, you're more than welcome to send them to me. We'll make those responses available to the board.
Yes, I was going to say, as long as we can all review those, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, that way we just kind of know what to, because I don't know how to answer the question. And you guys probably know the House bill better. So I'll send the questions to you and get answers then. Thank you.
Board Member Peterson.
I do just want to say that a lot I think we cannot underestimate the level of stress and fear that the Project Veritas has and those attacks on transgender and LGBT students have had, and they're real and our students are feeling them. And so I am very happy that House Bill 7 passed to allay a lot of those fears and to say we will take care of our children.
Okay, any other questions?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
About I'm happy when we take the lead on changes that we know are coming legislatively, like a later start time for high schoolers. However, at least in my district, that has created some difficulty because it impacts bus schedules, right? And it means that kids in the East Mountain, rural kids, are having to jump on the bus considerably earlier. And then it also impacts after school programs. And so I worry about that situation. And I understand that we're implementing something that is coming. I just worry about the timing of it. And if you can please send during these interim committee meetings, it would be really beneficial if when these great ideas come up, calendar changes, right, or hours, that we have some planning built in to any legislative, I'm trying to be politic here, any big ideas, bold ideas. We're a big district. If you can impress upon them that planning, I mean, families have already planned their summers and they've put the district in a horrible situation. So some lead time. It's not that, we knew that this was the desire, the 1140 hours, but giving us implementation time would be greatly appreciated. And while you're at it, having a budget that goes out 2 to 5 years would be really exceptional. And just keeps, as Howard Gardner once said, the way you get rid of a bad idea is you talk about a good idea. Lots. So thank you.
Any other comments, questions? We're good. Thank you so much for your update and all the work that you did during the session. I know there was a lot of stuff going through the halls, so really appreciate the work. All right. So I think we're moving right along, and we're going to now spend our time on student outcomes focused governance, which is one of our goals, and one of our commitments. So the next piece is the APS Board of Education Student Outcomes Focused Governance Self-Evaluation for year 1, quarter 2. And we have our board coach on, Ashley Paz, with the Council of Great City Schools.
Good evening, President Matoya Cordova and Superintendent Elder and Board of Trustees. How are you doing tonight?
I think we're hanging in there.
Good. Good. So I really appreciate everyone who took a moment to complete the self-evaluation in advance of tonight's meeting. Having done that will make our conversation tonight much more succinct and allow us to get through our business much more quickly. So I wanted to start off and just highlight, so everyone who completed the self-evaluation came up with the same score. That's 0 points. But that's but don't let that discourage you. I spoke with one of you today and said this isn't cause for alarm, because you did actually manage to get out of, so for the public's wayfinding, in the student outcomes focused governance manual, there is a rubric, and it has categories that are red, yellow, green, and blue. And so red identifies all of the areas that that we want to get the board out of and into more effective behaviors. The behaviors on the rubric are aligned with what research says is more effective for school boards who are focused on improving student outcomes. So these aren't behaviors that I came up with or that anyone in my organization came up with. They actually identified them through research and aligning what are the behaviors that are most consistent for school boards that serve in districts that where student outcomes are continually improving. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're actually just looking to see how you have made progress on your behavior changes. You've got the sign in the front of your dais, which I love. Student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Board, my first question for you, which adult has to change first?
Me.
Me, yes. So starting with the board and then hopefully trickling down throughout the district. So in the major areas where you have made changes, they're going to be on page 2 and page 3 of the student outcomes focused manual. That is going to be page 2 is specific to vision and goals, and page 3 is specific to values and guardrails. We're not going to go through every single line item like we did when we went through this process together in February. I first just would like to ask, because not everyone was able to complete the evaluation, are there any areas where you believe that your board may have gotten more than, may have achieved a score greater than 0?
I actually did, and I filled it out, and I thought I had shared it, but apparently it didn't go back to you.
You did, but everything is, but all of the criteria are
So it all,
still 0.
okay. So we're back at 0.
Right. So
Yeah.
mine had
But
scores on it too.
It's a little frustrating because it doesn't mean that we haven't been working.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's not the conversation that we're having today. You certainly have been working. So in order to achieve, let's look at the section vision and goals. So the first section in the red is pretty straightforward. It identifies behaviors that are not at all aligned with boards that improve student outcomes. Those would be the boards don't have adopted goals, that the governance and leadership teams are unable to differentiate between inputs, outputs, and outcomes, that your goals are not SMART, that goals are missing a population measure baseline, target starting date or ending date, and that the organization has not identified who their community is or a process for gauging their vision. You most certainly have you have had a very robust process of engaging with the community. You have adopted goals, and you all have demonstrated the ability to differentiate between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. There is still kind of a hanging question in the air around one of your goals and its ability to be SMART. So I want to be clear, for all of your goals, you are still missing a baseline and a target, but I'm giving you credit for that because you have identified everything. You're still waiting to determine the baseline because you're waiting on state testing. That's outside of your control. So that's not the question. The The question is on your goal number 4, what is the measure? So do you have a measure that has been articulated for goal number 4?
But I reviewed the interims, trying to get clarity, right?
Yeah.
And all we have stated is that we're going to use an SEL program. And for me, that is not specific enough. And I think I wrote, let me find I had to go back and highlight these boxes in red, magenta, rather, it sounds better. I think I wrote, if it were a peer-to-peer, if we were measuring peer-to-peer behaviors, right? Students acting on something that we could see and measure. We trained X number of students in peer-to-peer restorative practices, then that might work as an example of SEL.
Yeah, so those would be, so those are things that we talked about for the interim goals, but this is at the high level, the goal, because the board doesn't actually adopt the interim goals. The board only adopts the goal. So the board has a responsibility to be clear in what the expectations are that you're setting for the superintendent. So
could that, even though I was addressing the interim, I think it was an interim guardrail too. I don't know. I don't remember, but would that work as a goal?
So all that goal number 4 is missing is a measurement. It's missing, the thing that it is missing is how you will measure, how will you know whether or not progress is being achieved? But what tool will you use to measure that goal?
Yeah, because the only thing that it states, it's very vague. It just says is measured by an evidence-based and aligned tool. And that part hasn't come to light yet. Board Member Jackson, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this might be a question for the superintendent. The last time that we talked about this, Dr. Gutierrez was in front of us. And I haven't, has she been working on this? Does Dr. Gutierrez have an idea as to what kind of evidence-based and aligned tools she would like to use? Because again, I think this is where the expertise falls back to you.
Right. So we are in the process of moving towards RFP. I have to be a little bit cautious in how I answer this one because I can't indicate, if we have a preference towards one vendor or another before we go to RFP, but it is something we're bringing forward. And I feel we're in a pretty good spot as far as moving forward. I think it has been difficult a little bit in terms of I guess the question for me is, does the tool drive the measurement or does the measurement drive the tool? But we've listened and we've been working on this and we are, like I said, about to go into RFP. I just don't want to soil that process by getting too specific at this time publicly.
Okay, so you're saying that what Ashley is saying is that it's kind of the evidence-based and aligned tool is very vague. What you are saying is that as we move through the RFP process, you are getting to a more specific tool that will be used that can be the M for measure.
Yes. I believe that you guys provided quite a bit of feedback. I've learned a whole lot more about SEL over the last 6 months than I thought I needed to know. And I've sat with a number of these vendors just personally, and I do feel we're in a pretty good spot right now. But again, as we move into the process, I've got to be careful not to ruin the procurement.
Okay. So sounds like, Ashley, at some point pretty soon, we are going to have that M for goal number 4.
And it seems, I guess Superintendent, this is Yolanda, is the goal then is to have something that would be in play by the time the new school year starts?
Yes, so this will be part of the strategic plan. Remember, it's a 5-year rollout. So I don't remember where SEL sits in terms of things, but we've got a lot to roll out. And I do believe that the curricular issues are going to be, in terms of next year's, mostly design and begin of implementation. So, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So I can't remember exactly where SEL lined up, but yes, we'll have a tool certainly by next year, and then try to figure out how to integrate it into the system over the next few years.
Okay. So Ashley, from your perspective, then this goal is still kind of like iffy. I mean, it's a good one to have. It's one that's out there, but we just don't have it well stated enough so that even to go into like a monitoring calendar is where I'm headed. It's like it would be hard to set it up for monitoring because we just don't really have all the things in place or in play to really get us to that point yet.
That is correct.
Okay.
And then my question, Ashley, do you, I know you work with lots of districts that want to do a lot of the same thing that we want to do with Goal 4. Have you found some districts that have found a tool that is really successful in measuring the student outcomes, not what the adults are doing for the kids, but rather the outcomes that we see? Have you seen that?
So I have not, and in visiting with my colleagues at Council of the Great City Schools and a few other organizations that are kind of peripheral to our organization, this has really been a challenge that many districts have faced. And the direction that the majority of boards have gone is to actually turn their SEL priority into a guardrail, because really at the end of the day, what they are most interested in measuring what the adults are doing, looking at the conditions that adults are creating for students, looking at the things that the adults are doing surrounding SEL, and looking at how that is impacting student outcomes, which is very much a guardrail, but it is still a very high priority. I mean, it is one of the highest priorities of the district. That's why it's been articulated as a guardrail. So that's been the path that most boards have gone. And it's not, so I think that they're still, and this is something that I've seen across the country where they really want to be able to measure it as a student outcome. It's just been really hard. And so the boards have determined to go ahead and make it a guardrail until the districts can figure out how to do the measurement, actually looking at what the students know or are able to do when they could turn that priority into a goal. And mainly it's a matter of timeliness, and understanding that if I want to measure the social and emotional health of students, and I can look at what the adults are doing today, or if I have to wait 2 years from now to be able to create an instrument from scratch and then administer the instrument and then create a baseline, looking at that overall timeline, they have across the board said, we're going to make this a guardrail. That doesn't mean that it's not possible. And it doesn't mean that I don't have hope. You have some really bright people in Albuquerque, but it is something that I'm going to continue to bring up with the board until we do have a solution. So that's just my obligation as your coach.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on that? No? Okay. So moving right along. I mean, I know that we're still hanging on. And I hear what you're saying is that it is an important piece for us. I mean, it was for the community as well. I heard it over and over and over again about what students should be able to know and be able to do around their social emotional wellness and their pieces there. How to get there, it could be hard, but I'm going to hold out some hope here as well to see if we can be the first district that sort of cracks that code too, because we could do something really stellar here, but we could also stumble on it. And I think we just need to understand that we wouldn't be the first that would be stumbling with it.
Yeah, you definitely are playing to my competitive spirit. So
This group competitive? No way. All right, so where are we moving to next?
all right, moving on. So and that's really the big thing for y'all to move through for this first section of vision and goals. Once you get through that, you not only get out of the zero, but when you've identified, as soon as will have identified a measure, then the superintendent can have all of the interim goals that have been created, and we know that they are focusing on making sure that the last 2 bullet points under approaches focus, that is, the executive leader has adopted no fewer than 1 and no more than 4 interim goals to progress monitor each goal, and each interim goal is smart and worded just like goals. And so that's the second to last bullet point, and the last is the status of each interim goal is able to be updated at least 4 times during a fiscal year. So those are things that your superintendent and administrative team have been working diligently on. So once you get that, once that measure has been identified, then you're going to knock it out of the park. And I believe that not only to complete approaches focus, but moving into the next phase, which is meets focus, all goals pertain to outcomes that are related to advancing the purpose of the organization, or in this instance, student outcomes, because that's why school systems exist, is to improve student outcomes. In addition to their ending points, each goal and interim goal will have an annual target leading up to each date. So that means that you'll know not only what the over 5 years or 3 years for your interims should be achievable, but also have benchmarks for each year along the way. Next. All interim goals pertain to student outputs or student outcomes. The board included the input from the community in the goal development process. All goals last 3 to 5 years, and all interim goals last 1 to 3 years. And the goals and interim goals will challenge the organization and require a change in adult behavior. We already know that y'all are working towards that. So again, I don't think that you'll actually just achieve approaches focus. I think you'll actually get into meets focus.
Okay.
And then the next step is the board used a process for developing the goals, which included their community in a way that achieves broad ownership of the goals. All of the interim goals are predictive of their respective goals and influenceable by the leadership team with at least 80% autonomy of the inputs that influence the output. And the board relied on a root cause analysis, yada, yada, yada. All of those things are already true. So you will not only go to approaches focus and meets focus, but I really do believe that you will, at the point where you have that measurement identified, you will actually masters focus in that area.
Yay.
We like that.
Yeah. So going from 0 to 35 on this is going to be a really good feeling when it happens. And I'm really excited for y'all to be able to experience that and know that it is a lot closer than it may feel today. So then looking forward at the next step, which is the values and guardrails, you're kind of in the same position. You're really just looking for the interim guardrails. Once the interim guardrails have been identified, pretty much everything else is going to fall into place, and you will again go to master's focus. So are there any questions about these first 2 before we move on?
Seeing none.
Okay. And so I want to be clear, as soon as you are able to identify the interims, you not only go to 35% implementation of this entire framework, you'll go to 50% because you will have mastered focus in both sections 1 and 2, vision and goals, and values and guardrails. So then moving on from that, the next section is monitoring and accountability. So under monitoring and accountability, this is where you haven't just adopted your goals, but you go into the next phase of actually monitoring the progress that your district is making toward the goals. So it's great to set goals, but just setting goals isn't quite enough. You also have a responsibility to your community to continually monitor the progress that to which you're achieving those goals. So every goal should be monitored at least 4 times per year, and every guardrail interim guardrail should be monitored at least once per year. Notice I'm saying at least. That doesn't mean that you can only do it once per year. You actually can monitor it as many times as you want. It just has to be able to work out on your monitoring calendar, because we do recommend that you only look at 2 goals per month. And that's really just a matter of how you're allocating your time and making sure that you're not spending a whole lot of extra time in school board meetings, and that your time is really being focused on monitoring progress toward achieving those student outcomes. So under the monitoring and accountability, this is where you adopt a monitoring calendar. Once you've adopted a monitoring calendar, it gets you out of the red. And then one of the items is the board does not track its use of time in board authorized public meetings. I actually will be working with your lovely board secretary very soon on how to do that. And it will be I've created a really simple process for being able to do that. So it should take maybe 15 minutes generally on looking at your meetings and assigning time for your meetings. And I think I can't remember, is it by the end of this month or the end of next month that we have to get that done, Courtney? You don't have to have the answer. It's definitely by the beginning of next quarter.
And it's SIDME timeline, and yeah, it looks like it's by the end of next month.
Okay, perfect. And that will actually not only get you into meets focus, but it'll get approaches focus in this section, but it will also help you achieve approaches focus in the next section, which is community or communication and collaboration. So we've got approaches focus. Once you get your monitoring calendar, that'll be great. And then once you start your monitoring, 10% of your total board authorized public meeting minutes, monitoring your goals. So adopting a monitoring calendar, and then actually starting the monitoring process. And we're going to help you get to that a lot sooner by doing practice monitoring. We call it practice monitoring because you're not actually going to be looking at the progress that has been made toward your goals yet, because that really won't start until next year when your budget has been adopted and everything is really getting into the implementation phase. But what you will be looking at is the plan and how are the plans coming along, and the strategic planning process and whatnot. So, and it's really just about building up the skills that you need to be able to effectively ask questions and focus on student outcomes during those monitoring sessions versus identifying the inputs or essentially articulating what the superintendent is supposed to do. These are more of the accountability conversations about what has been done and what the plan looks like moving forward. So for everything else, you actually have identified by the end of the summer. So the end of the summer is the next kind of that is the next, like, I can't think of the word, that's your next benchmark for being able to move up to the next level after you've hit meets focus under monitoring and accountability. So I wanted to give you the option. We can go on and look at the last two sections, or we can move on with this conversation tonight. It's really up to you. I'm happy to do either way or answer any questions that you have about your self-evaluation.
I think we're ready to just move on to the next section for sure. So we could go ahead and get started on I know there's a lot of excitement around the alignment on goals and guardrails with the district budget. So
yeah. So are you so are you voting to approve? Are you adopting this self-evaluation tonight?
Yes, I believe we are. Do I have? I mean, do we have to vote on it, or we just have to get head nods? Oh, we have to vote on it.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So you're voting on a score of 0 and a goal for 50% at the next meeting.
So may I have a motion on this, please?
I'll move for approval of the APS Board of Education Student Outcome Focused Governance Self-Evaluation for year 1, quarter 2.
This is Crystal. I will second.
All right, let's have a roll call on that.
Peggy Mueller Aragon.
Yes to 0.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes.
Barbara Peterson.
Yes.
Crystal Tapia Romero.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Embrace it. Yeah.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Yolanda Montoya Cordova.
Yes to accountability. That's what we've just done. All right, thank you. So we'll move on to our next item, which is board members training on the alignment of goals and guardrails and the district budget. And this is a discussion with Ashley. She's going to do a little training with us on this.
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited to have this conversation with you all tonight. This is one of my all-time favorite things that we do as a board, and that is adopting the budget. Now, adopting the budget shouldn't be seen as this. I will tell you what's true for me. When I served on my school board here in Fort Worth, Texas, this was always kind of a nerve-wracking conversation for me to go into on my board. Talking about money is never fun. Talking about the future is always scary because there's a lot of uncertainty in it. And there was just a lot of just my own discomfort with finances and my own personal financial acumen. So if that's true for you, I would like to say welcome to the club, and let me give you another way of looking at the budgeting process. So you've just done a whole lot of work as a board with your community, with your district, and with each other to identify the priorities that your district is going to be focused on for the next 5 years. We call these the goals and guardrails. The budget is really where the rubber hits the road. This is where you ensure that you're actually resourcing those priorities. You're aligning the resources that your district has with the attainment of improving student outcomes while honoring the non-negotiables of your community. So the first thing, what is the budget? The district. So I want to be clear. The district's budget is not a governance document. In this governance role, we have a financial oversight of the budget. We have to adopt the budget, but really, and it doesn't matter if it's a school board, if it's a nonprofit board, even if it's just me and my personal for-profit business. My budget is nothing more than a management document. It is a strategically aligned plan that says, this is how I'm going to achieve my goals for this next year. So this is a plan that does just that. It articulates how the district will implement its educational program over the course of the next fiscal year. So in many states, New Mexico included, the board is required to adopt this plan. And this is simply just to recognize the financial oversight and the legal obligation that you as a board have to the district. the most important thing for boards to understand in this conversation is that you have an obligation to the community to ascertain the level of alignment of the budget to the achievement of the board's adopted student outcome goals and the adherence to your adopted guardrails. This is how you properly ensure that your priorities are being adequately resourced over the next year. Now, this first year, because you just adopted your goals and guardrails, the first year is going to be probably the least aligned that the budget will be over the next 5 years. And then the year after that, it will be more aligned. And the year after that, it will be more aligned. Typically about the second or third cycle is when you really start to have full alignment of the budget. And that means the resourcing of your priorities to the priorities that you have already adopted. Are there any questions about this, or would y'all like to have any dialogue or conversation among yourselves before I move forward?
What do you guys think? I mean, I think we've heard a lot about, I think even the superintendent talking about the adoption of the new way of doing budgeting is still going to take time to implement as well. He's talked about that. And then we've talked about, getting, the budget to get people sort of comfortable with that. And we've just rolled out our goals. So for me, it makes sense that it's going to be incremental, that it's not going to be just a slam dunk initially. And I think there's always going to be room for continuous improvement as we look at that, because I think what we're also going to be evaluating is just how well we did that as well, because I think we're going to do the best we can around. I think what we've done this year is push it out to the schools and saying, so how does your budget align with the goals right now around the things that we've talked about and we're asking you to do? How are you thinking about how that lines up? But I think they're also going to be getting feedback too, and we'll be looking back over the year and saying, did it match up? Did it not? Or hopefully not even waiting for a whole year, but maybe even doing an evaluation maybe after the first semester and saying, whoa, we really need to shift out and do something different. I mean, I could see how that could also occur maybe even at the site level. And that's just my thoughts. That's just me speaking about that. I don't know what you guys think.
I have a question. So would you recommend, obviously, before we have our monthly finance meetings, I meet with the team prior. Would there be any specific questions you would suggest that I ask or that we ask just to keep us on track and to make sure, we are aligned properly? Just so we're doing what we're supposed to, because I don't want to veer off track either.
Yeah. So Crystal, that's a great question. And I'm going to do something really, really aggravating. I'm going to push it back and say, what would you ask?
Okay.
What would you ask of your CFO or your superintendent or your leadership team to know that you have greater alignment between your budget and the expenditure of funds, the allocation of resources to your goals and your guardrails? What would you ask?
Well, obviously, when we look at each goal, wanting to know which one it's aligned with, but I guess finding out too, if they come with something that's not necessarily related to the specific goals, is it just scratched, halted, paused? What would be the follow through at that point? Or do we try to fit it in one of those stars?
Yeah. So my recommendation, or the coaching that I give to boards, is to ask open-ended questions, because that's where you're going to get the more deep conversation and more information from your team. So asking a question, how is this item aligned with our goals? And maybe it is aligned with one or two, maybe it's aligned with a lot of them. they are the ones that should be convincing you of that alignment. And then if there is no alignment, ask what is the plan for sunset, or is there a plan for sunsetting this? And if so, what is that plan? The district is going to, there are things that the district has to do that aren't your goals and guardrails. That nowhere in this framework does it suggest that the district should not do things that are not explicitly goals or explicitly guardrails. But pretty much everything will be associated in some way, shape, or form. So if it is an expenditure related to food service, then you've got to keep kids fed so that they can learn. If it's related to transportation, you have to make sure that kids get to school and that they're getting to school on time and that they have bus drivers to take them there. So I guarantee that there's always going to be some kind of way that they're aligned. But that alignment, sometimes it will be a stronger alignment and sometimes it will be a weaker alignment. And they should be able to articulate the level to which that is and where it really, really matters.
Have you ever seen like on a board agenda, like, where we have like the summary of what the topic's going to be, and they have specifically already outlined what goal that's tied to. So they start getting in the habit of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's actually, so that is something that your support team, Johanna and her entire group have really been working on getting that information to you all. And so I know that they're kind of right on the cusp of being able to do it, but they're again waiting to get the complete set of priorities for both your goals and your guardrails. But yeah, and to that same note, your budgeting team. So Renette has been incredible to work with, and she has really been putting forth a lot of effort to making sure that the alignment, even though you're still in the early phases of implementing this framework, she really has taken the task seriously about getting alignment and making sure that your budget is accomplishing your priorities. And I'm really excited for you all to see her presentation next week.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, a couple of questions, and Ashley. So right now we're at those incremental first baby steps at the school level. So that's where we are right now. So we're not at zero. So that's good. So now we're going to look at it, and it could be related to what they're doing at school. And they're saying, okay, we're going to put this, this amount of our budget toward X. And so then they will have to figure out in the end, did it work? Did it improve student outcomes? Okay. So I get that part. But when we're talking about like goal one, and I understand there will be stronger alignment at, the elementary level to goal one, but really not so much at the high school level, because we're talking about third grade reading. So I just don't know what that would look like for that at that high school, middle school level. And then how would the, goal 3 with high school graduates, how do you align that at the elementary level? And for them to really understand that you can't really meet all 4 of those goals, I mean, it's just not possible at each level, right?
Yeah, so that's actually a great thing that you've lifted up. Not every single one of your goals is going to impact every single one of your students. When we went through the goal setting process, we talked about high lever student outcomes and areas to focus on. High leverage and high impact is actually the terminology that we use. So where can we put our resources that's going to create the biggest splash? So we talk about like throwing a rock into the water. A bigger rock is going to make a bigger impact, whereas a tiny little pebble may make like a little splash. And you want to have the biggest the biggest rock that's going to make the biggest impact when you throw it into the water so that it can reach out and touch all aspects of the pond. That's kind of the same way with your high level, high impact areas of focus for student outcomes. So you've identified third grade reading and third grade math as areas to focus on for 2 of your goals. These are going to, so there are things that need to be addressed in the earlier years, so kindergarten readiness and first grade reading, that scaffolding, building the fundamentals so that they can be successful in the third grade. We talk about up until the third grade, students are learning to read, and then after the third grade, they're reading to learn. That's why the third grade reading, the third grade literacy is so important. So you have to do the work and make the investments in the earlier grades, the earlier years. So that's how it's going to address the younger grades. The older grades are going to be more specific to that third and fourth goals that you have that are around college and career readiness and building soft skills or the social emotional health of your students. Those are going to, so the social emotional is really actually all of them. There can be ways that they impact those goals in all of the grade levels. But the question for your superintendent is not necessarily going to be, does it work? Is it aligned? The question is more, how is it aligned? How is this aligned? And this is actually a really great segue to the next piece of this. So you were given a document prior to tonight's meeting. It was called School Boards versus School Boards, Superintendents and Budgets. Did everyone have an opportunity to read that document? You don't have to pull it up, but just a head nod will be sufficient.
Like, I don't remember getting it.
I'm looking at all my downloads.
Yeah, I don't think we got the document, the homework.
Okay.
Board member Jackson is sitting right next to me, and she did ask me, she said, did we have homework for tonight? Because I was sort of thinking about the SOFG cohort and all that, but I don't believe we got this one, Ashley.
Okay. So it should have been sent out with the at the same time as the self-evaluation, but it's okay if it wasn't. I'll make sure that you get it after tonight. So there is a document, it's called Superintendent's Boards and Budgets, and it talks about the budgeting process and how to do this work of alignment. And then what is the board's role in the budgeting process? And so it lifts up four different elements. So the first is the planning. The board's role in planning for the budget is really simple. You adopt your goals and your guardrails that reflect the vision and the values of the community. Once you've done that, then you have done the heaviest lift for the budget. You've identified what the priorities are for resource allocation. So that's the first one. The second one is the draft review. So all along the way throughout the year, your district is working on their budgeting process. And I know that this may sound crazy, but even now, as they're wrapping up this year's budgeting process, they're already starting the process for next year. So they know what the priorities are that you just adopted, and they're starting. So next year they're going to be able to start from that. So your priorities will be the basis for next year's budget. So the board should be given an opportunity to review and discuss the budget prior to your final adoption. Most boards do this over the course of a few meetings. I know you have a finance committee, and I'm still kind of learning the process, but I think they are primarily responsible for that oversight of the expenditures during the year of executing the budget, but even beforehand of asking some questions about the budget. This would actually be a great job for that. Since you're required to have a finance committee already, this actually would be a great job for the finance committee. And I'm sorry, board member Tapia Romero, I feel like I'm adding a lot to your plate without talking to you about it first. But it doesn't have to be if that's not what you want. You all have to be the ones to decide. But that could be a great place to kind of funnel some of this work to make sure that it's being done, but without taking up a whole lot of capacity from the full board. So during this review process, it's really important for you to look at it and to understand the level to which it's aligned with your priorities. And I want to be clear. If the board doesn't like the superintendent's draft budget, it's your responsibility to discuss why you think it doesn't align with the goals and guardrails, and then just don't approve it. Any form of modifying or amending or writing the budget or otherwise selecting the inputs, that's going to destroy your ability to hold the superintendent accountable for accomplishment of your goals. So it's really important that the superintendent be the one that selects the inputs. So if there's not something that you like on the budget, or that you wanted to see on the budget, or if there's something there that you didn't want to see, there's definitely a place to have conversation about that. But what you absolutely cannot do and should not do, and this isn't even specific to SOFG, this is just governance in general. The superintendent has to be the one to select the strategies and the resources that are going to be implemented. The board has a responsibility to ask questions, to understand alignment, and then to either adopt or not adopt.
So Ashley, I have some questions on that in terms of how boards handle this from like the administrative side of it, because I think there's two things that happen, and what I've seen happen with the district is that there's a budget request that we need to make and we need to send up to public ed, the state level, to just draw the money down, which is really important to not miss deadlines and timelines. And we have to approve just that request. And then there's like a budget. I think historically our district has just done both of those together, which I think makes it hard. So it's like, how do other urban districts delineate between those two functions? Because I think the first function of just sending up our paperwork up to the state so that we're on time and we're going to be guaranteed the funds that we need to get down first and foremost is really critical. But I also agree we need to have a budget on the back end in terms of how that's going to be spent. How do other districts do this?
Yeah, so I think I need to understand a little bit more about your process there in New Mexico. So is the board required, so the budget that you submit to PED, is the board required to approve that?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I have a strong recommendation that the conversation with the board happen sooner rather than later. So you don't want to wait until the last hour, the final hour, to adopt the budget if there's a possibility that it couldn't be approved. And the only
it needs to talk on that because it's an issue for us in our state because of just timing, and it has a lot. It's just awful. So go ahead, Superintendent.
Yeah, that's a great best practice. And the reality is we bring the budget forward as quickly as we can. But on this year, when you have a 60-day session and we didn't get the unit value until about 2 weeks ago, which was a good unit value, it definitely limits the amount of time that we can put a budget in front of the board. I think this year, I hope the board members, Ms. Apodaca and her team have come forward every month pretty much to say, this is what we're doing. Here's how we're trying to move forward. So yeah, there's not a lot of specifics, of course, in terms of how the money's being spent, but they have tried to talk about process. I think looking forward, we'll see how well we can do that. But it's there is a limitation on just the logistics of finishing in mid-March. So.
And it's usually due by when, Superintendent?
Usually we'll bring it to you the end of May because we have to turn it in early June so that PED can approve it before, we got to have it before July 1. So it has to be in the PED, usually the last week of May, first week of June, June. I know there's a month in there, sorry.
And that's what I always remember is that it's just, our process in New Mexico just seems to be kind of messy.
Wreaks havoc. It wreaks havoc.
I've been confused by it since the whole time I've been on the board because there's a couple of things that are happening there. One is we're juggling the need for us as board to also be really responsive to the fact that we want that money. We do. We would need to send up a document to PED that's aligned to all the PED documents too, which is draw down the money. But there's also this back conversation about how that money is going to be utilized, which seems to me is like the different conversations happening, but we're trying to crunch it all in one big meeting. And that's what makes it really hard. So for me, I always just look at it. I don't want to miss a deadline with PED because I don't want the complexity of the district not being able to draw down money on time. Because I think that's also an issue too, in terms of getting started with payroll and getting all of those things completed. So, I mean, I'm just really, I always worry about it, especially when we have a 60-day session and it's coming down to the 11th hour.
Yeah. So ultimately, the important thing here is that the conversation be had. You can have a conversation as a board with your superintendent about alignment to the alignment of spending your resources to achieving your priorities. That's what the conversation is about. Getting the budget to PED and all of that. That is mostly an administrative function. You don't, and really, you should understand as a board that you have a deadline that you have for PED, and that you have to achieve that deadline. The conversation has to begin in enough advance that you're not waiting until the last minute. And I understand the timing and everything, but ultimately, at the end of the day, all of the excuses in the world, whether they are, valid or not, if you're not achieving your goals, then you have failed children. And I know that that's harsh to say, but that is the reality of the situation that we're dealing with. And so your conversation as a board with your superintendent should not be one about PED and the deadlines and all of that. It is, how are we accomplishing our goals and resourcing those goals so that we can best serve children?
May I put it less harshly then?
Sure.
Before I pass it off to Barbara. Our monitoring process is going to begin that conversation. And so I think that will just be a natural outcome. So Barbara's been wanting to get in, so I'm done.
I was just going to say, in Johanna's defense, we did get that document. It was sent out along with the self-evaluation, and I completely missed it because I was looking at self-evaluation. Probably what we all did was look at the email, click on the self-eval part, and miss the other document that was attached. So Johanna did do her job. We just missed it. Thank you, Johanna. And, the other thing, and I just have to say, I mean, the fact is, we are talking like we've never prioritized goals or students when we've developed budgets before. And that's just totally absurd. I mean, as I look back at finance committee agendas in the past, we always put core belief and goals in that. And a huge amount of our budget is mandated. We have no choice. They're salaries. And in fact, as we look at the goals, there's not a goal there that can be achieved without prioritizing the human beings that budget is tied to. I mean, I think the only difference is saying, it's not like we're completely starting over. Schools have always analyzed what their needs are. And, are we going to put the money for a community school coordinator, or are we going to have to spend it towards a reading intervention teacher. I mean, those are difficult conversations, and achieving those goals will be different from school to school based on their community and their specific needs. I mean, I think that what we're saying is, let's do a better job of really analyzing root causes. Let's really do a better job of how do we align the budget with what is possible, and how do we prioritize? Because it's not like schools haven't struggled with that very question for as long as they've had any say in budgets, and it's not like the district has. It's fine-tuning it so that we really have an impact. And I think that's the difficult thing, because it's hard choices, because the budgets are tight. The budgets make you have to sometimes outright cannibalize your staff, and it is not an easy process. So I just want to say, we need to give credit to the work that's been done over many years by staff. Let's see if we can make it easier in a way by sharpening our focus.
Yeah, that's really, I love the way that you phrase that, Board Member Peterson, because this isn't a novel idea. This isn't new. This isn't something that your district has probably even been doing. The difference here, and I can't even say what's true for your board. I can say in general with most boards, the big difference in this process is that the boards have stepped back and said, we're not going to tell the superintendent how to align the budget. We are just here to ensure that the budget is aligned. It is inappropriate for the board to tell the superintendent how the money has to be used. What is appropriate is for the board to say, these are our goals, these are our guardrails. Essentially, these are the priorities that we've set. Now, superintendent, it's your job to align the strategy with these priorities by putting resources in the right places. He has to be the one to decide which FTE is going to get resourced and which one's not. And the schools, I think you have mostly a site-based budget. The schools have to be able to make those decisions. And we often say what happens in the boardroom can be seen in the classroom. If you expect for schools to be able to articulate how they want to spend their discretionary funds, then you also have to give the superintendent the autonomy to make the decisions on how the budget as a whole will be allocated. All right, so again, great place to transition. So we talked about planning, we talked about reviewing the draft. The next, and really the last two, is the superintendent has to convince the board. Once the draft budget has been completed, the superintendent must then convince the board that the first priority for the budget, the resource allocation of the district, is the accomplishment of the goals and honoring the guardrails. Once that has been, once he has successfully convinced the board of that, then you get to move on to approval. Once the board has been convinced that the superintendent's draft budget prioritizes accomplishment of the goals and honoring of the guardrails, then and only then will it be appropriate to adopt the budget.
Okay.
Are there any questions about that before my final piece?
No, I mean, I think oh, go ahead, Danielle. Go ahead, Board Member Gonzalez, because we haven't called on you.
That's okay. It's fine. I'm following and I found the document, so it's good. It's not a question. It's just a request. Do you have examples of budgets from other districts that demonstrate how those budgets are aligned to the goals and guardrails so that we can get a sense of what it looks like in other places?
So yes, we do have examples, but I do actively discourage boards from looking at examples from other districts, because what alignment looks like for Columbus, Ohio or St. Paul, Minnesota is not going to look the same as alignment for Albuquerque, New Mexico.
I'm asking more in terms of format, not the content.
The format. So you mean like the presentation format?
What does a budget look like, the format, to show you that it's aligned? Or maybe it is the presentation, but
yeah. So again, I think so it's really important for your district staff to do their own homework and to do their own work of developing their presentation, because it's going to look different for them than it's going to look for other communities. Once they have done that, once that has been achieved, then I'm happy to share some other examples. And I'm also happy to share videos from board meetings from other districts if you'd like to watch their actual budget presentations and see, kind of observe the questions that board members have asked. But it would not be appropriate at this time to share, because what they are presenting, and even the format that they're presenting it in, is going to be very specific to their communities, and isn't necessarily going to fit the needs or expectations of your board.
I was going to say, because what I was going to say is what's going to be really different, I think, this year for us as a board is that we do have goals and guardrails. I think last year in the budget, because we didn't, and it was just sort of like all over the place, we weren't really quite sure how we wanted it aligned. It really hadn't been agreed upon, and there wasn't kind of like how it was set up, I think, was what made it difficult last year. So I think going into the budget discussion this year, because we have identified those goals and guardrails, we have identified priorities, then it makes a whole lot sense. There's a lot more ease in terms of the kinds of questions we can ask, because I think we're all going to be looking for the same things because we have a same set of goals. We had to do that work, I think, as a board, so that we could be more coherent and we could be consistent with the staff so that they knew what we were looking for. And it wasn't just like what one board member is looking over another. So I'm excited about going into this budgeting process. I already have seen some tremendous changes, because you're already seeing Renette and her team shifting out how they're thinking about the money, the shift out to the schools, so that they're starting to align themselves that way. So I feel like it's going to be a much more organized conversation this year than it was for this board last year. Any other comments on that?
Well, to that end, Board President Montoya Cordova, just remember the goals were established in December. Ms. Apodaca has tried very hard to sort of try to capture data around those 4 goals this year. That's a baby step. And I think it will be helpful because she can sort of point to how some of the alignment in the budgets match up with the goals. What we discovered is that we're going to need to work with the schools and ourselves, as we still kind of see crossover, like one goal sometimes often sort of bleeds there. So there'd be a budget item that wasn't just aligned to one goal. But that was our attempt to really start to try to show how the money aligns. And that's, that was our Ms. Apodaca really and her team's work. So that will help a little bit. And then I think as we move forward, we'll get better at that alignment.
And I think the other thing too, Superintendent, what I like about APS's budget is that because we get updates regularly, right? I know that there's it's kind of like a living document as well, right? So always assessing where money is going, where savings is, what's happening or what's being spent and what's not, and then trying to figure out how to redirect funds. I know that happens frequently, but now that redirection hopefully is going to be taking into account the goals and the guardrails as well, in terms of how money is being redirected if it needs to be redirected.
That would be a logical next step. Yes.
Okay, so my final piece is really this is really kind of the uncomfortable part of the conversation that a lot of boards don't like until they've actually done it the first time. So we encourage boards to go into, and this is really the only time that we advocate for this perspective, but we encourage the board to go into reviewing this document with a high degree of skepticism. We want you to start with an assumption that there is no alignment. And at that point, it is the superintendent's job to convince you that there is alignment. This is not because we want to beat up on the superintendent or we think that they have done a bad job. This isn't about gotcha governance. That's something I always want to make very clear. This isn't about having a negative or difficult conversation. This is about ensuring for your children that you are responsible, that you have taken the responsibility of educating to make sure that the priorities for their education is what is the first and foremost thing in this budget. So again, start from the place of thinking that there is no alignment, and then having the superintendent articulate to you how alignment exists. I know that's difficult, but once you've done it and you've gone through the process, I think you'll really understand why and how it can be a really gratifying conversation. So how will the board know? We actually recommend 2 questions, and they're very similar. The first, the board president should be asking, are there any board members who have evidence that the budget does not address accomplishment of goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, or goal 4? And then the same thing with the guardrails. Are there any board members who have evidence that the budget violates guardrail number 1, guardrail number 2, 3, 4, and 5? And again, I want to be clear, are there any board members who have evidence, not any board members who think or have a pit in their stomach or a gut feeling. Do any board members have evidence that there is a non-alignment or a violation of either set of priorities?
Okay.
All right. That concludes my presentation. I'm here for any questions.
Any other questions? That was good. I mean, I really appreciate that because I think it was really helpful. We're coming up on budget review and adoption, so it's a good reminder for us on the homework that we need to do. So nobody has comments, questions? Ashley, thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to be checking in with each one of you in about a week from now to see if y'all read that document. So that you have my commitment.
Reading it now.
Don't read it right now. You're in the middle of a board meeting.
All right.
Y'all have a great night.
Thank you. All right, we're going to be moving on to our next item, and this is with Superintendent Elder to report on the goals, guardrails, and the strategic plan as it aligns to student outcomes, focused governance. So where are we? Superintendent is going to give us a quick report.
Well, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak. So since last we met 2 weeks ago, we have continued to work on the strategic plan. I think you should see coming up a PowerPoint that'll take us through that. My goal tonight was simply to show you some of the format that we're dealing with, so you kind of have a sense of what's coming. The goal is to come back next month, I believe the first 2 meetings of the month, and present components of the strategic plan. I don't want to do it all in one night because it will take too long, but we'll give you part of it on the first meeting of the month and then the second half at the second meeting of the month. So Sal, if you want to go ahead and advance this screen, I'm going to kind of zip through the first couple slides here, Sal. So this has 5 buttons, Sal. 5 times. Keep going. There you go. One more. There you are. So that's where we are. As you know, that there's several phases. We are in phase 3, the strategic planning, which is the facilitating meetings to analyze and respond to the organizational diagnostic. So our steering committee has been meeting weekly, and then they're having small meetings throughout the week, but we meet as a committee of the whole once a week. We've also been hosting advisory committees. Our most recent was last night. I will say that it was spirited, and there were some things that were said that about the process that were very positive, and there were some that said they weren't sure that we'd gotten to what they wanted. So it was a really positive, useful meeting, and we're going to continue to move forward. There was also some talks about communicating the strategic plan when we move forward. And they had some interesting ideas on different ways we could engage with the community that may not necessarily just be in our spectrum, but maybe outside in other avenues with other organizations, showing up at local fairs, festivals, that sort of thing. And having, the ability to discuss the strategic plan with the community at large. So it was a good meeting. Next slide, please, Sal. And these are just the APS priorities that we had identified moving in. Go ahead, Sal. We talked about those. So I wanted you to see, this is just a typical slide of the format that we're working under. So for example, strategic priority 3, which is engage students, the concept of cultivating safe schools and classrooms that keeps all students engaged in their learning. And what you can see here is there's 6 initiatives underneath that. And the majority of these have central office leaders in partnership with school and staff to strengthen implementation of whole school systems and routines. And we use an example of positive behavior intervention support that promotes a welcoming, engaging in culture where students want to come to school every day. And what's interesting, we've added some notes here for you. You can kind of see how we took the feedback from each of the groups that we met with as we did all our focus groups, and we put notes on them to really show where we were focused and how they affirmed or told us not to work down. So there was a few initiatives that got knocked aside. And this is just an example. I just wanted you to see kind of what it looked like so that you'd have an idea of what the plan coming next month will look like. Let's see. And again, they were really, it's a great one on 3.6. The reason that's purple is we added that after a number of focus groups, because we had a lot of students, families express their desire for more communication about existing resources. So we added that. Some of the language changed on the feedback. So we really did try to listen to what the community and our focus groups are giving us. Let's go on one more slide. And so I can shoot the next. This is sort of gives you an idea of the next step of what happens under that. So what you see is under an initiative, we have a work plan. And what we're trying to do is lay out each of the steps that will occur. And I don't know if you can see this. I can't. It's pretty small on my screen. And I'm very jealous of Board Member Gonzalez and her ability to get a good light in her room. I feel like I'm speaking to you from the crypt. And I've got these stupid phones and their flashlight trying to light my face up a little bit, but all it's doing is blinding me. So anyways, these are, as you can see, there's a step under each of these. And then we've identified the person that's responsible for it. And we're beginning to put in dates for that work to occur. And this is just a draft. So this may be a little old. These dates may change. Please don't be taking pictures of it and saying, ah, but this is what we want you to see that we're going to present to you over the next month. And this is sort of how it lines out for the work to be done over the next few years. So let's go one more slide, Sal. So go ahead and click this one, I think about 4 times, Sal. So we're really trying to clarify how this will, how this will work. So when we look at the board's goal, they identify where we're going as a system, and the strategic plan outlines how we get there. So how we get there, strategic plan outlines the work that we'll have over the next 5 years in order to achieve the goals. It identified the 4 major priorities and a aligned set of initiatives for the district to implement in partnership with schools. And then the rules of the road, the guardrails, are implementation norms and 4 disciplines of execution, which we've talked about quite a bit. It's a book study we've been doing, are all different flavors for how to effectively go about implementing it. And then, of course, knowing how far we've gone, the interim goals and the interim guardrails and measures to help us know if we're on track. So this is how we're sort of trying to align the strategic plan to the work of the SOFG and make sure that it all makes sense in the end. One more slide, Sal. Actually, I think this may be it. Yeah. So that's what's coming next month. We'll be rolling out the big plan. And we continue to work on the interim guardrails. Like I told you last time we met, due to the budget, graduation, the strategic plan coming kind of to a head, we've had to, we're slowed down a little bit, but we are still working on the interim guardrails as requested, and we will have those, I believe I said last month in June. So just trying to keep those timelines straight and make sure that you all are aware. So that is what I have for you tonight. And I stand open for questions if you have any.
So Superintendent, one of the things that I do want to clarify is that next month, as the board is only meeting on the first Wednesday because we canceled the second Wednesday due to graduation. So,
yeah, we'll figure it out. I mean,
yeah, so we just need to figure
maybe
that
it's the first one of May, and then we'll figure it out. We'll work.
Okay.
on it.
Yeah, I just wanted
may
to
change
bring
my
that up.
timeline just a little bit, but
Yeah, so that
we are on pace. We're on target where we
okay.
that we would be.
All right. Board Member Gonzalez, did you have your hand up and then took it down?
Well, it was just about that pace. What is the target? So I sort of had previously in my notes that May was when we were expecting it to be finished. And so it's still generally May, but do we have any more specificity around that overall timeframe?
Well, we begin implementation over the summer and into next year. So that's, like I said, when you look at what I showed last time was it showed a breakdown of the 5 years, and there's design, implementation, and then monitoring, right? And so, like I said, with each of the goals, what we're trying to do is we can't do everything the first year.
No, I get that part. Sorry, my question was more about the development of the plan itself.
The development plan is, we're really close. We will show you the plan beginning in May. And then as far as it kicking off, the idea is it will kick off at in over the summer and into next school year.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
To that end, I'll just say Attune's been a great partner. I think you made an excellent choice, and I feel pretty good about the product that we're going to bring forward.
That's great. It looks like there's been a lot of work that's gone into that. I'm really excited to hear about the advisory committees and, you know, the work that's still going on with the community and the other voices in that. So that's awesome.
Right. And we're looking at working groups to assist us as we move forward and continue to take that type of feedback. We did offer that first to the advisory committee if there was any of them that had interest in a specific initiative that they wanted to remain connected to. So we'll see where that goes.
That's great. Any other comments, questions? No? All right. I'm excited to see it as well. All right. Thanks for hanging in there this late, but that was good. That was good to finish on that too, because I know that it's been a lot of work coming to that product. So it'll be great to get to the finish line on that. All right. So announcement of upcoming board meetings. We've come to the end. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 at 5 p.m. here in the John Milne Community Boardroom of the Allison Bruce King Educational Complex, or virtually at www.aps.edu. And the next special Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, April 26th, 2023 at 5:15 p.m. or immediately following the Finance Committee meeting, also here in the John Milne Community Boardroom and also online. And with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.